It was the spring of 1887, and the winds in the Colorado Territory still carried the scent of snow from the mountains, though the meadows below had begun to green. Aspen Hollow was a quiet place, nestled beneath the hills, where folks worked hard, prayed soft, and believed in the power of starting over. The train hissed into Aspen Hollow with a long, weary sigh, like it had just crossed half the world. And in a way, Lena Cartwright had. She stepped down in a borrowed dress, gripping a satchel that wasn't hers, and holding a ticket that had someone else's name on it, Eliza Cartwright. There he stood, tall, weathered, as unmovable as the land behind him. Silas Granger, rancher, widower, waiting for a woman he didn't know, hoping she was the one who would fix the gaps his life had worn through. "Miss Eliza?" he asked, offering his hand. Lena hesitated just a beat, but then stepped forward and took it. "Yes," she said softly. "It's good to meet you." The lie wasn't born of malice. It was born of desperation. Back home, she'd been a whisper in the wrong room. The girl whose broken engagement had been announced at supper like a canceled train. Rumors clung to her like soot. Her father stopped introducing her at gatherings. Eliza, perfect, polished Eliza, had said it was best to just wait it out. But then Eliza had received the proposal from Silas Granger, a rancher in the Colorado Territory, an arrangement, a fresh start. Eliza had laughed it off. "Imagine me milking cows and raising a farmer's boy? No, thank you." She left the letter on her writing desk. Unanswered. Forgotten. Lena picked it up 3 nights later. "I didn't steal it," she told herself now, watching the man beside her load her trunk into the wagon. "She didn't want it. I just accepted what no one else would." The boy beside Silas peeked at her from behind his father's coat. Wide eyes, bare feet, maybe 5 years old, not smiling but not hiding either. "And this must be Toby," Lena said gently. Silas gave a short nod. "He don't say much to strangers." Lena gave a faint smile. "Neither do I." She climbed into the wagon. The wind smelled of horses and pine and the kind of space that could swallow you if you let it. She sat with her hands clasped tight in her lap, heart thudding. "Just for a few months," she whispered to herself. "Long enough to fade, long enough to be someone else." The wagon rolled on, and the truth stayed folded in the bottom of her bag, with Eliza's name on it. The Granger Ranch sat just beyond the creek, tucked beneath a stand of silver-leafed aspens. Lena had never seen land so wide and sky so close. The house was plain but solid, like the man who owned it. Inside, the air smelled of pine soap, fresh bread, and the faintest trace of loss. She was up before the rooster that first morning, determined not to give Silas a reason to question her presence. The chickens scattered at her approach, and she nearly tripped over a goat that seemed personally offended by her existence. Silas stood on the porch, arms folded. He didn't say much, just handed her a dented milk pail and nodded toward the barn. Lena took it with aching hands and kept her chin up. She didn't know how to milk a cow, but she knew how to pretend like she did, and for now, that was enough. Later, while wrestling with a stubborn pump handle out by the trough, she heard a soft voice behind her. "You're doing it all wrong," the boy said. Toby stood in the shadow of the porch holding a wooden toy horse with one missing leg. His hair stuck up in tufts, and his face was too serious for a 5-year-old. Lena smiled. "Then maybe you should show me how to do it right." He hesitated, then walked barefoot across the yard. Together they worked the pump. Water splashed across her skirt, and he giggled. Just once. But it was the first sound of joy she'd heard since arriving. From the window, Silas watched. He didn't say a word. But when she served supper that night, he didn't comment on the burned cornbread. That was something. After the meal, Lena sat near the hearth, sewing a button back onto one of Toby's shirts. The boy curled up beside her, head against her side, asleep before she could finish the hem. Silas stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "He don't take to folks easy," he said. "Lost more than a child should." Lena didn't look up. "So have I," she said quietly. There was no more talk after that, but something passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the fragile start of something that could grow. The days that followed settled into a rhythm, rough and dusty as a ranch hand's boots, yet somehow comforting. Lena worked hard, hands blistered and sun-kissed, but she didn't complain. Not when the fence leaned, not when the doe refused to rise, not even when the goat head-butted her in the thigh for the third time. But the quiet victories meant more. The first time Toby offered her a wildflower without a word, the way he let her comb his unruly hair and didn't pull away, the moment he handed her a piece of his world and waited to see if she'd treat it gently. One evening, as the sun folded itself behind the hills, Lena found Toby sitting under the apple tree, whispering to his toy horse about clouds shaped like ships and cows that didn't listen. She lowered herself to the grass beside him. "That's Captain Patches, right?" Toby looked up, surprised, then nodded solemnly. He was going to be a knight, but he lost his sword. "Knights don't need swords," Lena said. "Just courage." He studied her for a moment, then said, "Mama used to name all my toys, and she sang. Real pretty." Lena's heart tightened. "Would you like me to sing something?" He nodded once. So she did. The lullaby was old, soft, and laced with a bittersweet memory. Her voice wavered at first, but the more she sang, the more the quiet around them felt safe again. Toby leaned into her, eyes fluttering closed. And for the first time in weeks, he slept soundly through the night. From the edge of the field, Silas stood motionless, watching. He didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. Like the song had stirred something long buried, something tender, something he didn't know he missed. The next morning, Lena found a small basket on the porch. Inside, fresh eggs, a loaf of warm bread, no note, but she didn't need one. Silas had said thank you, the way men like him did, in offerings of trust, not words. And in that quiet morning she realized this place was no longer just a hiding spot. It was becoming something else. That night, after the house had gone still and the boy was safely tucked in, Silas saddled his mare and rode toward the far hill. No words had passed between him and Lena after the song, but something in his chest had shifted, quietly, uncomfortably. The hill was crowned by a lone pine and a modest stone, worn smooth by wind, rain, and time. Ruth Granger. He dismounted and stood there in the dark, hat in hand. The breeze stirred his coat and the long grass, but not the stillness in his soul. "I didn't think I'd feel anything again," he murmured. And then a stranger starts singing lullabies to our boy. And suddenly, the silence ain't comfortable no more. He crouched beside the stone, brushing away a few stray leaves. "You were the only woman I ever thought I'd love. And now there's someone else sitting in your chair, folding his shirts, singing him to sleep." He paused. "I don't know what that makes me. I don't know what that makes her." The wind picked up for a moment, no answers in it, only movement. "I'm not asking for permission," he said quietly, "but I hope wherever you are, you'd understand." He placed a small bundle of white daisies at the foot of the stone, Ruth's favorite. Then he turned, climbed back into the saddle, and rode home. Not because anything was settled, but because something inside him had softened, and that was enough for now. The morning after the storm, the air was bright and scrubbed clean, as if nature had rinsed away its temper. But inside Lena, something still churned. She was folding laundry on the porch when the post-rider stopped at the gate and handed her a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, Eliza's. Her stomach turned. She tucked the letter into her apron, nodding thanks, then slipped inside. She waited until the house was quiet before opening it in her room. The words inside were kind, but firm. Eliza wrote of guilt and confusion, how she never truly intended to marry anyone, and how she hadn't known Lena would actually go in her place. "I hope it's not too late," she wrote. "I hope you haven't hurt anyone." The letter dropped to Lena's lap like a stone. Her secret had always been a shadow following her. Now it was dragging into the light. That evening, she laid the letter on the kitchen table in front of Silas. He read it slowly, jaw tightening as the truth settled in. When he looked up, his voice was cold. "You're not Eliza." Lena didn't flinch. "No, I'm her cousin, Lena." Silas stood, pushing his chair back with a hard scrape. "You lied from the first moment." "I didn't mean for it to go on this long," she said, rising. "I thought I could help. I thought I'd leave before it mattered." "Well, it matters now," he said sharply. "You came into my house, into my son's life." Toby stood in the hallway, watching, clutching his toy horse. Lena's eyes found him. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone, Toby." He looked at Silas, then at her. "Are you going away?" Lena crouched down. "If your pa says so." Silas didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice had dropped. "Pack your things." She nodded, her throat tight. "I'll leave in the morning." That night, she packed in silence, folded every stitch into the borrowed trunk and left it by the door. But when dawn broke, she stepped outside and found Toby already awake, barefoot in the dewy grass, feeding the chickens with one hand and holding Captain Patches in the other. He looked over at her, blinked the sleep from his eyes, and said, "I saved you a seat in church." Her breath caught. She glanced back at the trunk, then at the boy who had quietly chosen her long before she'd earned it. She didn't say a word, just nodded, and left the suitcase on the porch. Later that morning, word had already begun to ripple through town like wind across prairie grass. Aspen Hollow didn't thrive on scandal, but it didn't ignore it either. The cousin who came in another woman's name had become the center of hushed conversations and watchful eyes. Lena hadn't planned to stay, but she hadn't planned on Toby either. And when he looked up at her with sleepy eyes and said, "I saved you a seat in church," something in her cracked wide open. So she came. Dressed in the same modest dress she'd worn when she arrived, hands folded tightly in front of her, heart a battlefield of shame and something that almost felt like hope. She walked beside Silas and Toby, but there was a distance between them, small in steps, heavy in silence. Silas hadn't said a word since the night before. Not about her staying, not about anything. The church steps were already filling. Mrs. Tilling whispered too loudly to her sister. Mr. Barton adjusted his spectacles twice as Lena walked past. No one said her name, but no one needed to. Then Evelyn Cole, the minister's wife, stepped from the crowd with quiet grace. "Lena," she said, voice clear, "the children haven't stopped humming that lullaby you sang. They keep asking when you'll come back." Lena blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you," she whispered. And then Reverend Cole emerged from the chapel doorway. He paused to meet a few uncertain eyes. The good book's full of folks who made mistakes, big ones. Some ran, some lied, some doubted. And still, God used them. Not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to change. He turned toward Lena, but his voice remained steady. So before we pass judgment, may we remember, God's worked through hearts far more broken than this young woman's, and He's done greater things with them too. A hush fell over the church steps. Reverend Cole added with a soft smile, "If she's here trying to do right, then maybe we let grace speak louder than gossip." Silas took Lena's hand in his then, in full view of everyone. He didn't speak a word, but his touch was louder than any sermon. And Toby, ever brave, stepped forward and looked up at the townsfolk. "She's my ma now," he said. "You don't have to like it, but I do." That was the moment the whispers lost their bite, and the truth no longer needed hiding. The clouds had been gathering since noon, slow, dark, and brooding. By late afternoon, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel, and the wind was no longer playful. It howled low and steady, like it remembered something dangerous. Silas was in town, picking up feed and spare hinges. Lena stayed behind, keeping an eye on the chickens and trying to patch the fraying seam of Toby's jacket. She didn't see him slip out the back door, not at first. It was the roar of the creek, swollen now, surging with mountain runoff, that pulled her to the window. And then she saw him. Toby. Standing far too close to the edge, toy horse clutched in one hand, his boots slipping on the muddy bank. "Toby!" she shouted, heart slamming into her ribs. She ran. Out the door, across the yard, down the slope. The sky cracked open above her as thunder rolled through the valley. The water had already started to rise. "Toby, step back, don't move!" But he turned toward her, and the bank crumbled beneath him. He slid down with a cry, legs half submerged in the rushing current. Without a second thought, Lena lunged. Mud flew, skirt soaked, hands scrambling for anything solid. She reached him just in time, grabbing his arm and pulling him close. "I've got you, sweetheart. I've got you," she whispered, anchoring them both against a jut of rock. The water surged. Her feet slipped. She gripped harder, willing herself not to let go. Not now. Not ever. Then, strong hands. A new grip. Silas, mud-streaked and soaked, hauling them both up the embankment. They collapsed together in the grass, breathless, wet, shaking. Toby clung to Lena, crying now, not from pain, but from fear, finally given permission. "I just wanted to wash Captain Patches," he sobbed. "He got all dirty." Lena held him tighter. "You matter more than any toy in the world." Silas knelt beside them, chest heaving. "You could have been swept away," he said, voice raw. "So could he," Lena answered, her own voice breaking. There was a pause. A long, heavy silence filled with more than rain. Silas looked at her, truly looked, and something shifted in his eyes. The wall cracked. Just enough. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why would you risk your life for a boy who isn't yours?" Lena looked down at Toby, who had curled into her side again, trusting her still. "Because he is mine," she said, "not by blood, but by choice." Silas didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either, and that, for now, was enough. Night came quietly, as if it too were worn out from the day's fury. The house was warm, the hearth low, and Toby lay curled on his cot, dry now, but restless. Lena sat nearby, mending the sleeve of his jacket for the third time that month. Her needle paused when she heard the whisper. "Miss Lenny." She turned gently. "I'm right here, sweetheart." Toby sat up, his voice barely more than breath. "I thought you were going to float away too. Like Mama." Lena moved to his side at once, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Oh, Toby," she said softly, brushing his hair back. "I'm not going anywhere. Not if I can help it." His lip trembled. "Promise?" She gathered him in her arms. "Promise." He clung to her then, arms tight around her neck, as if he was afraid letting go might make the world shift again. She held him long after he'd fallen asleep, breathing steady and safe against her shoulder. And in that still moment she knew. This wasn't just protection. It wasn't duty. It was love. Fierce, real, and rooted in something deeper than blood. The kind of love that stayed. The morning after the storm dawned clear and bright, as if the sky itself had finally breathed easy. The land glistened, washed clean, and the barn creaked gently in the warming breeze. Lena stood at the kitchen table, brushing the last of the mud from Captain Patch's. The toy horse had survived, though he was scarred now, much like them all. Toby padded in quietly, still in his nightshirt, rubbing one eye and holding a biscuit he hadn't quite finished. "He looks better," he said, nodding toward the horse. "Almost new," Lena said, offering it back to him. But Toby shook his head and pushed it into her hands. "You keep him." She blinked. "He's yours." "He was," Toby said, then looked down at his feet. "But yesterday you didn't let go, and Mama said when someone saves you, they're part of your story now." Lena knelt in front of him, heart caught in her throat. "Toby." He reached up, touched her cheek. "I want you to be my ma, not just for now, forever." Her hands trembled as they came up to cover his. "That's a big thing to ask," she whispered, voice cracking. He nodded. "But I still want to." She pulled him close and held him tightly, tears spilling into his hair. "Then I'll be yours, as long as you'll have me." From the doorway, Silas watched. No words, just stillness. But behind his eyes something deepened, something ready to step forward. The days that followed were quieter but not empty. The weight between them had changed. It was no longer mistrust. It was waiting, breathing, choosing. Lena didn't press. She worked the land with care. She sang to Toby while mending his shirts. She stayed up late, sometimes just watching the shadows move across the kitchen floor, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she'd found the one place she wasn't meant to run from. Silas watched her more often now, not with suspicion, but with thought. Every movement she made with Toby, every quiet kindness she gave without being asked, every corner of the house where her presence no longer felt like an echo of someone else. One golden evening, while Toby napped under the apple tree, Silas found her in the barn brushing down the mare. "You know," he said, leaning against the doorway, "I never expected any of this." Lena didn't turn. "Neither did I." "When you arrived," he continued, "I thought you were a mistake, a stranger with the wrong name and the wrong story." She lowered the brush slowly. "And now?" He walked toward her, the distance between them shortening not just in steps, but in years of quiet hurt. "Now, I think maybe God didn't send the wrong woman. Maybe he just sent the one I didn't have the sense to ask for." Lena turned to face him, her gaze shadowed. Impossible to read, yet heavy with meaning. "Is this still a bargain, Silas Granger? Or is it something else now?" He reached out then, took her hand gently. "It's not a deal, not duty, not rescue. It's a beginning. And if you're willing, I'd like to make it real." Her eyes welled, emotion rising fast for words. "I've been waiting to stop running," she whispered. "Then stay," he said simply. "As Lena, not Eliza. Just you." And there, in the quiet scent of hay and earth and long-settled grief, their foreheads touched, and their first kiss came not like fire, but like peace. Outside, the breeze shifted through the grass, and far off, the chapel bell rang once. It didn't take long, just a week or so after that quiet kiss in the barn. Not because they rushed, but because when something is true, there's no sense in waiting longer than you need to. The town had seen enough to understand, and Silas had said all he needed to say with a touch, a look, a hand in hers every morning since. So when summer rolled in gentle and golden, they chose a day, not grand, not loud, just honest. Just theirs. The meadow behind the house, where the aspens arched like a silver cathedral, was where they said their vows. Not in a chapel, but beneath open sky, with wildflowers swaying and birds stitching songs through the trees. Lena wore a dress she'd sewn herself, cream, simple and beautiful. Toby stood between them, his small fingers tucked inside both their hands, his eyes bright and serious. Reverend Cole's voice carried gently, "A promise isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about choosing, every day, to stay." When Lena said "I do," it wasn't out of obligation. It was out of knowing, out of gratitude, out of something sacred. And when Silas answered in kind, it wasn't a vow born from emptiness. It was one shaped by loss, healed by truth, and filled now with a quiet kind of joy. Later that evening, the three of them sat beneath the apple tree, Silas, Lena, and Toby. Captain Patches lay nearby in the grass, his paint faded, but still whole. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence was no longer hollow. It was full of trust, full of love, full of everything that mattered most. And if anyone ever asked how it all came to be, the town would just smile and shake their heads. Because sometimes the right person walks in through the wrong door and stays. Because grace knows the way better than we do. And sometimes a second chance is the first real beginning.